All right, good morning. Warm welcome from me, Thomas, as well, and Kivanc, my co-founder. Very happy to see you. And again, proud to have our very first London edition of the Epic Summit. Welcome. So today isn't just supposed to be any conference, and it's certainly not about showboating what DataGuard does. Although we do have sales in the room, and Vipul will take your business if you like. But it's about more than that. Hopefully we can really provide you with some deeper insight, with some networking opportunities, and just have a fruitful day. It's really supposed to be for a broad range of people, from kind of seasoned cybersecurity experts to compliance guru, all the way to people who are really just newer to the field and venturing into this. To start, Kivanc and I would like to offer some insights that we took away from working with over 3,000 customers at DataGuard over the last almost 7 years. Between the two of us, we've now talked to more than 1,000 privacy, infosec, and compliance experts and leaders in the last years. And so we would just like to channel some of their insight, share a few statistics, and an anecdote or two. So let's get started, and we'll dive straight into the first area we'd like to look at, which is regulation and a raised bar. I hope you can see that. So obviously, the regulatory landscape has changed. GDPR did level the data protection playing field. Some would say for worse, but certainly most would say for the better. It soon became a global role model for other privacy frameworks, be it in Brazil, be it CCPA in California, and those frameworks took over a lot of core principles, such as data subject rights, and I think that in itself is quite an achievement for, in a way, setting a standard and for kind of personal data governance, not just in Europe but beyond. One thing that changed the game as well and did make it a board-level topic rather than really just an expert topic for the likes of us, was certainly the regulatory scrutiny, some of the hefty fines that were introduced at the time that caused a lot of confusion and also pushback, obviously, from businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses. We did start with a focus on small and medium-sized businesses, and now obviously also cater to larger organizations. But at the time, 2017-18, we really did feel that it was widespread confusion and pushback also, especially amongst the smaller organizations. But ultimately, that did make it a C-level topic. It did make it a boardroom topic, and that hasn't changed. NIS2 obviously coming into effect in October 2024, so a little more than a year. We believe will have a similar effect as GDPR, just in terms of leveling the information security playing field. One change is that under GDPR and also UK GDPR, there was quite a bit of delegation that executive management could do, right? So you could appoint your risk officer, your DPO, and ultimately, in a way, also outsource some of the responsibility. And I think one thing that will change under NIS2 is that executive management actually has to sign off on cyber risk management and monitor risk management as well. And that is quite a fundamental change, so it's harder to delegate that decision in-house or to a third party, and we think that that's quite a fundamental shift, and again will bring quite a bit of board-level attention to the topic of data privacy and information security. Of course, there are many, many more frameworks, from SOC 2 to Cyber Essentials, that are affecting organizations today. And NIS2 is the one that Kivanc will focus on for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. So, what is NIS2? NIS2 is a European directive, and perhaps a lot of you are going to say, "Oh, we are lucky here in UK. It's not directly effective," and that's true. But I'm going to show afterwards in a second that's also going to be applicable indirectly for a lot of companies here in UK. But building on what Thomas said, I think is something that is going to have a similar effect worldwide as GDPR had, and NIS2 is seen for the experts like Professor Kipka as one of the most complex and legal framework for IT security. And the single most important recommendation is to start implementing now to protect the company. And similar to GDPR, it has a good idea in our eyes, is to really make sure that the companies not only do a check-the-box exercise, but really make sure that the company is secure, which sometimes could be two different things. Why most complex? It comes first with the scope. So it's not only essential industries you could imagine, like energy or perhaps food. It's way broader. So if you are an IT system provider, that is going to be directly affected in Europe. And the numbers are like that in Europe, it's going to be 180K companies directly. But, and I think that's the more relevant point for you guys, is that roughly 10 times, 8 to 10 times of the companies are going to be affected indirectly. Because those 180,000 companies have to make sure that the whole supply chain is also NIS2 compliant. And I think similar to that, as GDPR was pushed through the supply chain worldwide, NIS2 was also going to be pushed in for IT security. And what does it mean? So if you're a marketing agency catering a French food company or an IT system provider, this is going to come in October 2024, so next year. We see similar learning curves, meaning that a lot of companies don't know that even the directive exists, or if it's applicable, what they have to do. And we expect, as close to GDPR, days before calls and saying, hey, can you make us NIS2 compliant? And that's not going to be possible. That one we can already share. And that brings me already to the next point of implementation. So what is the recommendation that people that wrote the NIS2 say? So it's Mr. Decker, where we had a webinar together a couple of months ago, and he said, make sure that your ISMS is in place. So if you have an ISO certification, that is 70 to 80% of the basics, of the foundations, and also make sure that your company gets the first level of maturity. And that's what companies should do right now. What are the remaining 30%? Three things that we would like to highlight is early reporting. So if you were afraid of, in GDPR, not being able to report breaches in 72 hours, with NIS2 you have to do it in 1 day. So that's going to be really challenging. So after you find an incident, you have to make your first initial report in 24 hours, which makes a lot of pressure on infrastructure, people, processes to be really able to do so. It makes sense to be so fast because that's a dangerous time. So if there's an incident, you have to make sure that the things don't spread. So complex, challenging, but in our eyes, it really makes sense. The second one is risk management, and it's all about effectiveness of it. Yeah, right now, a lot of risk management tools or risk management processes make sure if the risk measures are adequate. So if you do a firewall that is good enough for your company, but doesn't test if the firewall is really working as it should be. Or you have to do trainings, but you don't do phishing trainings. If really people not only apply it once in a scientific area or like a theoretic area, but really don't click on the things. And all those continuous measures are the things that really protect the company. And that's why there's a big focus on it. And the third one is supply chain. Why? Because according to the recent numbers, the attacks increased by 600%. What does it mean? So they go first to the marketing agency, and from there to the bigger companies. They first go to the tools, Microsoft Teams, and then enter the companies. So that is the easiest way right now to enter companies, and that's why, independent of NIS2, if you just want to protect your company, make sure that your supply chain is also secure, and that is the third thing that comes on top of a regular ISMS. Net-net, we think that all the things that we have here on the list are relevant for any company that helps to protect the company, and in any ways start early and don't wait until October.
Another area we'd like to look into is data and AI. Obviously the amount of data being processed is only going one way. It's going up. One thing that we did find interesting is that as per the usual kind of this is manifested in that epic battle, or maybe just the gentle back and forth between companies trying to get more data intelligence and deeper insight into customer data. Particularly important now with the rise of AI, or the widespread use of AI. And on the other hand, there's data governance, right, where the regulator, as so often, is playing catch-up ultimately. So The Data Act is in its final stages, and obviously its main purpose is to create that single market for unused data, for used data, and ultimately enables data to be shared across the EU and across all sectors. Ultimately, we think that, again, will be to the benefit of research, to the benefit of businesses, but that piece of legislation is obviously in its final stages. And then there's, of course, AI. We took that, it's the only meme for today, where we did take that off LinkedIn, right? There are some concerns around AI, but obviously the tech optimists, you know, say the Reid Hoffman's, founder of LinkedIn, of this world, he called it a steam engine of the mind, a cognitive GPS, and a tool for orientation, discovery, and navigation. And he likened it to kind of the scaffoldings with which we used to build the cathedrals of Florence and so forth, right? I think, of course, there are other kind of much less romantical, more skeptical views, kind of Oppenheimer-esque warning of potential disaster right here. As always, there's probably a middle path to be found. But I mean, ultimately, again, from a regulatory perspective, we do have the AI Act, already controversial, just like GDPR, just like NIS2, ultimately supposed to provide guardrails. Proponents will argue that it'll provide us with a necessary regulatory framework, and that'll basically enable risk-based regulation of AI, and that's deeply, deeply necessary. And obviously, on the other hand, the opponents will argue, or are arguing, that AI is in our hands and we should speed it up rather than kind of slow it down with European red tape, and that we're already kind of losing the battle here versus the US and China. I think from a practitioner's perspective, or from our very own perspective, trying to get inspiration for our wedding speech 3 days before on ChatGPT, we know that the usage of AI and Gen AI is spreading without a doubt. And we know that with that spread, there's more and more questions on what policies do we have in place, and how do we kind of make sure that our organization is leveraging AI for good, but ultimately, and not violating any compliance and security areas. Now, ultimately, there's cyber, and with cyber come cyber attacks. We collected a few statistics for you guys here. I mean, you've all seen them, depending on how deep you are in the infosec and cyberspace. But yeah, from kind of and we can give very, very kind of tangible customer examples, right? From customers who've had ransomware attacks, a hospital that we take care of that was basically had the risk of having to stop all the operations unless they pay that ransom. That was quite the incident for us, but we see obviously across all of our organizations. I don't know if many of you might have gotten EasyJet booking confirmations yesterday that went around. So in our organization, half the staff was flying somewhere according to the EasyJet confirmation they had in the inbox, myself as well. I was flying to Amsterdam on the 19th of November. I wasn't aware of that because it's not happening. It's just a phishing attack, right? So yeah, these threats can obviously have very severe implications on businesses. And with AI, there's new ways in which attackers can leverage tools, right? So obviously now you can prompt ChatGPT kind of for crafting viruses, and you can combine that with GitHub snippets and kind of GitHub Copilot elements, right? That just make attacks a lot more powerful than they used to be. However, it can also be leveraged for cyber defense. And in an ideal case, AI can even be leveraged for the upside, right? For winning business and for winning contracts. So one area that we see that our customers deal a lot with is security questionnaires and in RFPs. And customers do spend a lot of time filling those out, trying to win enterprise business. And these kind of tenders, or these questionnaires as part of tenders, they're the norm, and you can definitely leverage. but I think you can definitely leverage AI to kind of read through your existing policies, documents, and data, identify relevant information, and obviously then kind of backfill and summarize for these RFPs. That's kind of that retrieval, augmented generation, and grounding, and that kind of results in significant cost savings and hopefully also the opportunity to win business. So yeah, takeaway here, we do think there's that risk from leveraging AI for cyber attacks, but there's the opportunity to use it for cyber defense and ultimately, hopefully, to also win business rather than lose it.
Thank you, Thomas. So that was second part, what we see on the market, technology. Let's focus on you guys, what we see on the market, what we see in the companies. And first of all, we see a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure coming from regulations, authorities or other regulations. Also customers, be it B2B customers or B2C customers. So Thomas touched on the RFPs. So every single big company makes sure that GDPR, that infosec is really in place. So that is a pressure that increases. But also in B2C, more and more data subjects make sure that if they order something on a e-commerce shop, that the data is also dealt correctly. We have a couple of examples with us. Investors also really make sure, be it PEs, VCs, so on. Say really, if you want to get money, even banks, you have to show that you're compliant and secure. We see more and more cyber threats that we've seen. And on the other hand, suppliers and, especially the big enterprises also put pressure. And who's dealing with that right now? Typically, individual departments. So head of legal, head of privacy would take care of CCPA, GDPR, perhaps HIPAA in the US. Compliance would take care of whistleblowing, Supply Chain Act. The IT department, perhaps ISO, NIS2, but quite isolated. It was interesting, we just had a chat here, that in our eyes is not the way you should do, and it's also dangerous, and you can't do the things without the support of the other departments. And the combination of the pressure with the companies, like the departments, trying to deal this alone is not a stable situation. And that's, if you take as an example a car manufacturing company, and you have to make sure that your factory is really protected, you use Gen AI, that someone has to take care of the Gen AI Act, then you have perhaps millions of drivers, and they have the data subject requests. All of those things are right now in the responsibility of other companies, and you over-communicate and you get in a really complex situation. So in our view, the only way to solve this is merging those departments also more and more together and at least increase collaboration. And if you take the departments together and all the regulations and all the frameworks, all the topics, that is the way to go. And that's also a trend that we see. So we see the more mature the companies get, and not only has to be size, not only the big enterprises are doing this, really mature tech companies, our customer base, they start merging the departments. So a privacy department gets a privacy and infosec department, or a privacy, infosec, and compliance department. Other companies are merging the ethics area with the compliance area, because they're all interlinked, and only if you join forces, you can deal with those things. And what it does is, in our eyes, something that is really great. It upgrades the role, especially of a DPO. In 2018, in DPO 1.0, as we call it, a lot of the roles were seen as a necessary evil, and someone had to take care, be it for DPO, sometimes similar for CISO. But now, more and more, those people are involved in way more strategic topics and say, okay, how can we generate more revenue with the data? How can we really make sure that we grow, we make digital innovation with Gen AI? So the scope increases, the upsides hopefully also increases, and the strategic impact gets increased, and you now get also access to the board level, which is exactly what it should be. So the DataGuard DPO 1.0 becomes a DPO 2.0 with a broader strategic angle. At the same time, the requirements for this role increases. So you have to have more IT knowledge, you have to have also more innovation character, and so a level up is needed. But what's the takeaway here? Merging the departments and thinking more collaboratively is one. And the second one is you need an aligned management system or governance system. It doesn't make sense to make a risk assessment for privacy, then for infosec, then for compliance. You end up with 3 different views. It should be one that is across privacy, infosec, and compliance. And then, again, you have an aligned view. And the risk in one area could be a lower risk in another area. But then you have a holistic view. And that's exactly how it should be. And that's also what we see. The more mature the companies get, the more aligned the departments are, and the more they have an aligned management system. And we hope that many will follow.
So, to try and implement some of that, that's not going to be done by an AI. You need people. And so we're going to look at the supply side, and that's both kind of the human side of things and then the automation or software vendor side of things. Again, some statistics, some numbers on the left-hand side. Not much of a surprise, right? 94% of European companies say there's a privacy skills gap, and we see that, right? So I can tell you from our very own personal perspective at DataGuard, we're more than 250 people now on the team, and it's hard to find good experts, and it's hard to find people who can, on the one hand, explain complex things to customers, make things understandable for civilians, but really have the ability to deep dive into kind of the weeds of the legalese or really help out when there's a data breach, right? So that's hard. We looked at the study from on kind of the cybersecurity workforce gap. So you can see that in the UK there's more than 50,000 positions that are currently unfilled, and where people are looking for information security staff or cybersecurity staff. And so that leads to a big pressure on companies to automate. And if you look, we read another CISO study the other day where 80% of CISOs currently say their main lever is automation and kind of buying tools to help solve these issues. And that leads to, and again, a concrete example from our customer base. I was speaking to a CISO the other day. She's been a CISO for 20 years, really experienced in the field, leads a global organization across multiple countries for a big software house. And she was saying, look, I have a patchwork of vendors because I have PwC running a NIS2 readiness assessment right now. We bought one component, like a data subject request tool from one vendor. Then we have an internal expert who built up kind of the basics of our ISMS, but that's mainly in his head, and he might leave. So then we need to make sure that stands on more stable ground. And so forth, right? Obviously a whistleblowing tool from another vendor. And we think that patchwork is exactly the opposite of what Kivanc was saying right now is best practice in some of the larger organizations. Now we know larger organizations have a lot more resources, and I think we might hear about that later in the day, but you see large organizations like Porsche, like Bosch and so forth, really merge these kind of AI ethics and governance functions and risk management functions, and kind of try and go the exact opposite way to versus having this patchwork of vendors. We also think that it leads to an influx because especially in compliance and security as quite a new space where there's a lot of new vendors, a lot of new entrants. A lot of the software in this space is not necessarily built around expertise, but it's really built around the promise of we can automate compliance away or we can automate security away and we'll reduce 90% of your compliance cost. And we think, as a buyer, one should really be quite aware of overpromises because we do think that it's always going to be a need for a hybrid. So for a hybrid solution where you have a human that helps you, that knows your business, knows your processes, and can help you solve problems, deal with your requests and organization-specific matters, and then on the other hand, a software that takes care of some of the day-to-day, say the whistleblowing, and setting up an ISMS, doing documentation, task management, etc. So where does that leave us? Ultimately, we strongly believe in that built-in rather than bolt-on. And also, again, from our very personal perspective, we started as external DPOs for the mid-market, right, in Germany, and then we expanded to other geographies, and we built up the infosec practice. But really, it started as almost kind of lobbing information from the outside into the customer's business and trying to help them that way. And that is how the role is understood in the GDPR as well, of the external data protection officer, right? You are supposed to work with the customer towards GDPR compliance. And we do think that that's really changing. And I'll open these three things, right? So from giving outside expert advice purely, and then having a couple of point solutions to solve data subject requests or deal with DPAs, we really think that organizations are going to go to a single vendor approach where it's really a broad PIC suite, which is a challenge for us, right? Because that means that for our customers to meet your guys' needs, we need to build a broad suite. We don't have to have absolutely everything, but we need to have more capabilities. We need to have more solutions in one platform. And that can be via a marketplace, can be via partnerships, which we do in pen testing, for instance, or in whistleblowing. But we do believe that it needs to be fully integrated with the customer stack, and much more integrated with the customer stack and processes than before. I think on the left-hand side, that's what Kivanc was referring to with maturity earlier on. It really did go from a tick-the-box exercise where we're getting calls, hey, this is a Q1 topic for us, and then we'll hopefully never touch it again. It went to, oh no, this seems to be an ongoing topic, and I do need to build a team, and I do need to get external experts and software into this. And yeah, I think Kivanc elaborated on the middle one. So these are our takeaways. Hopefully that left you guys with some helpful nuggets. And with that, we thank you for your attention, and look forward to having you here for the day.